In May of 2010, 16-year-old Khalif Browder was walking home from a party with a friend when he was stopped by police. An officer said a man had accused them of stealing his backpack.
They came out the police car and they searched us, but we didn't have anything on us. So I was thinking the next step was we're free to go. We're just gonna walk home.
A high school sophomore, like millions of others in America, with a love for basketball and professional wrestling, Khalif was arrested and charged with robbery.
They set my bail for $3,500. You know, my mom told me she didn't have the money, and it was true. She didn't have the money. $3,500 was a lot for my mom.
He was taken to one of the toughest jails in the country, Rikers Island, where he would spend the next 3 years for a crime he says he didn't commit, without ever going to trial.
The only thing on my mind was I gotta go home. I didn't do this. Now I'm in jail around these grown men, and they're fighting each other, and I don't know. It was like hell on earth. We were beaten. We were beaten, stomped by the correction officers, hit with weapons. They tackled me in my cell where there wasn't any cameras. They grabbed me up, they put me on the bed, and they were just punching and kicking me. And then they maced me in my eyes, they maced me in my nose and my mouth. I couldn't breathe.
3 years of alleged beatings, gang violence, and over 900 days in solitary confinement, all while he waited for a court date that never came.
It was just, we're not ready for trial, we're not ready for trial. And every single court date, I always had it on my mind, I'm going home this court date, I'm going home this court date. The judge told me if I plead guilty, I would release from jail that same day. But I didn't do it. You're not gonna make me say I did something just so I could go home. If I gotta stay here 5 more months just to prove that I'm innocent, then so be it. It's just heartbreaking, and it's like, I felt like they were just playing with my life.
In June of 2013, all charges against Khalif were dropped, and he was released from jail. But by then, he'd missed his junior year in high school, his senior year, proms, graduation.
I lost my childhood. I lost my happiness. I don't really tell too much people about this, but it's like, sometimes I talk to myself, and it's like, it's actually embarrassing. Sometimes on the train or the bus, I have a whole conversation with myself for 5 to 10 minutes, and then it's like, you're really crazy. Like, you really talk to yourself. But being in solitary confinement that long without talking to anybody, I feel like that maybe had something to do with it, because that's where those habits started to pick up. You know, deep down, I'm a mess, because it's like, I'm 21, and in the inside, I feel like I'm 40. I always believed in standing up for what I felt was right. And if I would have just been guilty, then my story would have never been heard. Nobody would have took the time to listen to me. I'd have been just another criminal.
It's just, we got to know Khalif's family quite well after his passing, of course. But to see this young man go through this trauma, how many others are there out there like that? How many kids out there get jammed up like this and claim, hell, I did it just to get out of this madness? This young man stood it for 3 years. But this is quite a story. But getting to the fact that out of that 3 years, he spent 900 days in solitary confinement. Now that's sheer torture. Now, again today, we have Victor Pate. I got it right.
Yeah, this time, right?
Victor Pate, right. My friend, and he brings us these stories of people being incarcerated. And today we have a young lady that's spent some time in prison, Tahiba?
Yes.
Tell us your story. I understand you got out and got your bachelor's degree, and you started your own organization to help other women coming out of prison. Give us a little idea of how you got started into this mess.
Into the mess of incarceration?
Solitary confinement. I understand you spent some time in there. What does it do to your mind?
Okay, solitary confinement, I spent 10 years in a federal prison.
10 years?
10 years in a federal prison. Solitary confinement is it takes you, it makes you hallucinate.
Okay.
It doesn't do well with your cognitive responses.
Okay.
Because once you are in solitary confinement, everything else is closed off. With lack of human interaction, you become an introverted psycho. And
Okay.
unfortunately, a lot of people don't come out of that. I was fortunate enough to come out of that because I didn't spend as much time as Khalif did. However, I still suffer some anxiety problems from it because I can't be closed in. When I'm in a crowded room, in a crowded space, I get, what is it called?
Panic attack?
Yeah, panic attack, exactly. And I never had that before prison. And one day when I came home from prison, I was on a train and I was doing my everyday, duties, going to work or school or program or whatever it is I was doing, but the train was never crowded. Until this one day, it became extremely crowded, and something took over, and I had an out-of-body experience where I saw myself run to the door and crouch down and scream, "Get away from me!" And I was so gone that there was a man in front of me asking me, "Ma'am, are you okay? Ma'am, are you okay?" And it's like on the third call, I actually responded and came out of the trance and was like, "Yes, I am." When really I wasn't, but I just knew. I saw me run into the corner, scream, and "Get away from me!" And next thing you know, when I came to, I was still just standing there, and I never experienced that before. And
Wow.
so yeah, it plays a lot on your psyche. Solitary confinement, you start seeing things, things that are not there.
Right.
And sometimes, things are there and you don't want them to be there, and it's all psychological, and it just do a paradigm shift on your brain to where when you come home from prison, it takes more than just support of your family to get through it, because no one wants to talk about it. Like he said you just heard him say, "I don't really want to talk about it," but he'd be talking to himself. I still talk to myself.
You just talk to yourself?
Oh yeah, because you play these things out in your mind. And I've been home since 2011, and it's nothing worse than not having anyone to talk to. And when you're in prison, and when you're in solitary confinement, a lot of times you don't have people to talk to because you're in solitary confinement. Sometimes they put you in a room with one other person. And then sometimes, if the prison are overcrowded and they want it to bust from the seams, which that has happened as well, they'll put you in and pack you in like sardines. So and then it's like then that's a brawl right there. You asking for fights. You asking for a lot of different things that endanger your health and endanger your body physically.
How does it feel as a female being like that? I mean,
Well,
it's
it was
tough enough being a guy. But it's got to be twice as bad for a female.
Well, it is twice as bad because we have bodily functions that men don't
Yeah,
have,
that's-
right?
yeah.
So when we have our cycle,
Yeah.
our menstrual cycle, it's not like we could go to the store and get a whole box of pads or tampons and that'll last us for a whole cycle period. No, what we have to do is they give us like 3 to 5. And that is to last us for the entire time we're on our cycle.
What?
And if we ask for more, we have a problem. It's always, why are you using it? What are you using it for? When, dude, like, what do you mean what I'm using it for? You don't wear one pad all day.
Right.
You don't wear one tampon all day. You have to constantly change these things.
Okay.
And living in that type of environment, it's not conducive for, it's very, hygienic is very nasty. And you don't have a shower. You shower like 3 times a week, maybe two times, maybe 3 times a week. So if you're on your cycle, you don't get special privileges. You don't. So you have to become very into ingenuity. You have to have ingenuity, and you have to be very creative in what it is that you do. So we learn how to make tampons out of sanitary napkins, literally. And we learned how to, take
Pull
the
them
cotton
apart,
out,
roll
roll
them
them
up.
and fold them and twist them, and those are our tampons. Now, tampons last longer and go a longer way, a long ways than sanitary napkins. So for even the people that didn't use tampons upon entering prison, sometimes resorted to using tampons because there's really short supply or no supply.
But then health becomes an issue
Yes.
because you're not allowed to shower but twice a week.
twice, maybe 3 times a week, and that's if they choose to come and get you.
That's right.
Now, you know,
Yeah.
you took me back to when I was in the Gambia, in the dungeon where Kunta Kinte was held, because they said that they were packed in that dungeon. So, to such a degree, they stood up. Nobody laid down because they were packed in there. And it was men and women and children. And I'm thinking, women having their menstrual period, people urinating, defecating, they were packed in there. No toilet facility at all. The disease that can occur over a period of a week or 2 weeks while they were waiting for the ship. Here you're in a cell, not the same conditions, but somewhat similar. And the fact that you're not even allowed to bathe but twice a week.
Maybe.
Maybe. I had an uncle who was in federal prison. He was in Allenwood. And there was a gentleman that had surgery, an elderly man. And after the day of the surgery, they sent him back to the facility. And those men there literally took care of this old man.
Yes.
In post-op, when they wouldn't even allow him to stay at the hospital to get the care. And this was a former federal judge.
The former federal judge is the one that had the surgery?
A black judge had the surgery.
Oh, wow. Well,
And the men in his quad took care of him. And I don't know how they got whatever they needed, but to dress the incision and to clean it and everything. But it was just appalling that an old man having surgery couldn't stay in the hospital a day beyond his surgery. They sent him back to the institution.
What is,
Here's, and I just want to just
what
jump in
about
just right quickly.
I want you to bring up the fact that solitary confinement is considered torture. All right. We have several bills that you've introduced, or you're working with.
We're working on legislation now to.
What kind of progress have you made with that?
Well, making progress, but not enough progress. And let me speak to that. The first point that you spoke to, that solitary confinement is considered torture. To go even a little further than that, in 1955, 1957, and again in 2015, they came about a resolution with our United Nations Council, and they came up with what's considered the standard minimum rules of the treatment of prisoners. More recently known as the Mandela Rule.
Ah, okay.
What the Mandela Rule specifically states is that no one should be held in any long-term isolation. More specifically, no one should be held in solitary confinement past 15 days. This is a resolution that has been signed by all of the nations that have agreed that no one should be treated inhumanely and no one should be held in long-term solitary confinement. In our New York State prisons and jails, we have up to 4,000 people right now held in some type of solitary confinement and or isolation, not including the people that are just kept in isolation in their cells, which is considered keep lock, is about 1,000 people right now. So the campaign for alternatives to isolated confinement, which I'm a New York State campaign organizer for, currently has legislation pending, and it's called the HALT Bill.
Right, the HALT Bill, right.
Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement. And what that basically entails is that we are saying that solitary confinement should not be implemented past 15 days. If a person has found that there needs to be placed in separation, that they do this humanely. But in the same token that a person being placed in separation, that they receive some type of treatment, some type of services, and some type of interaction. You heard Taiba speak about being alone with no other human contact, which is what happens in our prisons and jails right now. Our HALT bill will change dramatically how people are being separated for behavioral issues, but more importantly, the services that will go along with a person being separated from general population. Oftentimes what happens is that people who have mental health issues,
Yeah, that's
people that are gay, transgender, bi, okay,
Yeah.
people with disabilities are even placed in solitary confinement. So you have people being placed in solitary confinement that are of the vulnerable population that we consider them in our prisons and jails. And even while in solitary confinement, people are consistently being abused by the very same people that are supposed to be watching over them. So how do you expect a person to be placed in a situation where they're totally isolated from people, not being able to communicate with people, not being able to have any other human contact for alleged behavioral problems, and you don't give them any type of treatment, but you continue to abuse them? So how do you expect a person to become better by them being treated worse? You have people coming out much worse after they're placed in solitary confinement.
Well, we know that Obama, in his last year, he they had passed a law. What was it?
Yeah, he went to Oklahoma.
Right.
To a
Right.
prison
Right.
in Oklahoma, and even the guy in the White House now is talking about prison reform. I don't know what that's supposed to be for
I'm
him.
scared of that prison reform.
But President Obama wanted to change the way in which the prisons are being handled and administered, how they're being run.
Right.
Privatization became a serious issue because
Right.
you know, corporations are not looking out for the well-being of the inmates, and they're looking at the inmate as a dollar for profit venture. So, and we've had a judge, I think it was in Pennsylvania or Ohio, that was sentencing young men to prison, to a private prison for the
getting
money,
money.
and he was
Yeah.
getting
That's
kickbacks
right.
from the prison. And this was a white judge sentencing white kids in that region
all
of
about money.
Oklahoma.
All
Oh, no,
about money.
I think it was Ohio, and they caught up with him. You know, so. But how many lives did he damage? And it was a boy who wound up committing suicide.
Yeah. Well, let's just
Because of that.
Khalif is a practical and really the example that we all can see. Here's a 16-year-old. Now, what does solitary confinement do to a young mind who's not really developed yet in human contact and human communication? And I think this is a real case where we see how the mind develops and being abused. But again, you know, a female being under those circumstances, I mean, you've come out now you see how helpful you can be to, but what helped you get you through this? The love of your kids? Or,
Therapy.
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 You actually went through therapy?
Yes, I
Okay.
went through therapy.
Tell us what therapy was like.
Therapy, well, it took some time for me to go there because I didn't know I needed it, and nobody wants to admit that they have
Crazy.
yeah, well, not crazy.
How
Isn't it?
tactful.
Yeah, not crazy.
Well, I would think it drives you crazy,
Well,
doesn't
no,
it?
it's just a little, you know, shifted. You know, you're
Well,
not,
you
they're
said it
not
was
cra-
psychotic
Yeah,
experience.
it is. But you're not crazy because then if you're crazy, then you need psychotropical meds, and I don't need those. What I needed was to release all the anxiety that I was having due to my experience as formerly incarcerated person.
So you don't want to admit that you were crazy.
I'm not crazy.
I mean, you were crazy.
At that time.
No.
When you're
I wasn't.
delusional and psychotic,
But it wasn't okay. So at that time inside of prison, that's when the delusion and the psychosis kicks in under solitary confinement.
Okay.
You're still not crazy because you're still in your own mind. You're not hurting anyone. You just sometimes because of the long time that you spend in there, and you're not talking to anyone, you kind of like become an introvert and you become reclusive. I wouldn't say crazy, I just would say reclusive, and you don't have an outlet because you don't think anyone understands where you're coming from. You don't think anyone ever been there, and how can I talk to someone that never been there and don't understand what I'm saying? And then they're gonna think I'm crazy. So I'm not gonna talk to you. However, there was a lot of things that was going on in my life upon release that, you know, overwhelmed me at one point, and I had to go to therapy. And I didn't realize that it was a collateral consequence for me being in prison, as well as me trying to reacclimate into society and to become a successful person in my own right, because I had so much on my shoulders. So therapy helped me work through all the anxieties and untouched stuff that I had from prison. So that's what helped me. But I wouldn't say I was crazy. And you know, and be careful with language, please, because language matters. We're not crazy. We're not inmates. We're formerly incarcerated that have gone through some stuff and may be a little displaced in society that rejects us at every turn because they want to label us as returning citizens. However, again, back to, we're not returning citizens. I don't believe that at all, because when you're sentenced to any type of felony conviction, you're sentenced to a civil death. And what that means is that your civil rights are taken away, and they're lost. So when you come back into society, your civil rights are not resurrected upon your release. Because if that was the case, we would have housing for formerly incarcerated men and women, regardless of their crime, because now people don't want to talk about they want to divide violent from non-violent. They want to divide the fact that if I'm a sex offender and stuff like that, they're willing to keep sex offenders in solitary confinement for whatever reason, and that's not, you shouldn't do that.
That's making them worse.
Exactly. So it's a lot of things that happen. It's hard for us to find employment. And school is one of the major outlets that I advocate for, because school helps the formerly incarcerated person dispel and move away from that number and go into BA, AA, MPH, MSMW, PhD, JD, and you move so far away from 1467914 to becoming a productive so-called citizen. Until you get your rights back, you're really not.
Well, I use that word a lot.
Crazy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've been crazy a lot in life, and you know, I've been considered crazy.
He's not saying he's been healed. He's just
Exactly.
Well, you know, I've got God in my life, and that's what got me.
Amen.
And that's what got me sane. And I think it's all planned genocide anyway. It's our society is out there it's determined to drive you crazy. Everything, if you're black in America, everything is like this nut we got in our White House. They put a crazy man in the White House to drive us crazy.
You call him crazy.
He's definitely psychotic. He's delusional. I mean, and he's a New Yorker. I mean, they put a New Yorker in there.
Is he really?
He's a New Yorker.
I don't think so.
born and
Yes, he
raised.
is.
Oh my gosh.
He's not
New
from
York
Kenya.
is the
He's not
center of
from
the
Kenya.
universe. I mean, he's not human, okay? He's not. He's
It's
something
like something
different.
they made in the
But he's a
lab.
New Yorker. You've got the craziest people in the world here in New York. And you've got some of the nicest people on the planet here.
Yes.
Because it pulls you each different direction. There's a swing of the pendulum. You have to live with craziness in order to stay sane.
Living with craziness is different than being crazy. Everybody it's called controlled chaos. Is
Okay.
what it's called. Yeah, it's called controlled chaos. It's not really, craziness.
That's crazy.
Craziness is controlled chaos.
Right.
Being crazy is when people are considered crazy, and I say this because I've been around people that are mentally challenged, and that does take psychotropical medicine, and
Ooh.
those are the ones
That's
that they constantly put in solitary confinement
Well.
for behavioral issues, because they took away all of the medical facilities for them, the mental facilities. They took them all away. We had the G building, is what we used to call it, at Kings County. It's so depleted. It's not even what it used to be. And why? Because of funding. And where are the people going? They're still here, but where are they? They're in prison. And what are they doing in prison? Wreaking havoc in prison, and they're not giving them
No treatment.
the treatment that they're supposed to be getting. They're just medicating them, constantly medicating them to where you see them walking around like zombies. And if they don't take their medicine, they snap.
Well,
And then
they get dependent on a psychotic
Exactly.
drug to keep them sane.
Exactly. Yes.
And the medicine, without the medicine, it's all a different cycle. It's all control.
Yeah, and then they go to solitary confinement because they're out of control behavioral matters, and they stay in there.
And then they
So
get
what
the
keeps
treatment.
you sane through all this?
God.
Victor?
Well-
Amen.
Well, and just to add on to what Taiba said, like, you know, and people, like I said, I mentioned that people going oftentimes solitary confinement, they don't have a mental health issue before they go in. When they come out, they do.
Right.
And
Right, exactly.
like Taiba mentioned, you know, being in solitary confinement, you begin to hallucinate, you begin to talk to yourself, you begin to see things that are not there, and you begin to imagine all of this stuff is going on that's really not going on at all, right? So in order for you, I know for myself, you know what I'm saying, that I did, you know, talk to myself, you know what I'm saying. I imagined things that were there that I really knew wasn't there. But that was my reach
Outlet.
to try to
Yeah.
maintain
Coping.
on to, some type of sanity whatsoever to make myself not go beyond that point where I really became unconscious to what was really going around me, and I began to lose myself totally. So I began, like I say, I'd sing all types of songs, you know, songs that I just made up, you know what I'm saying? I'd have conversations with people that weren't there, and I just sort of like try to keep my mind operating where I just wouldn't just sit there and just be. Because if you sit there and you just be, and you start looking at, oh, I'm in a cell by myself. There's nobody to talk to. There's nobody here. You begin to lose yourself.
Yeah.
Because then your mind is not active. And you need to have mental stimuli. And in solitary confinement, you don't get that, so you have to make it. So whatever means that you need to use to cope with maintaining your sanity, that's what you have to do. And like Taiba said, you know, you come out of solitary confinement and you still have that, you know what I'm saying, you don't want to be around people, you don't want people to be around you. It's hard for you to really interact again. So it's a transition process. And that's why the Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Isolated Confinement has a specifically designed program by which if people need to be separated, once again, the key to this is that no one be in isolated confinement past 15 days. That's the key to
All
it.
right, let me run a video so the public can get a good idea of what we're talking about. This is, I believe I forgot the title I have, Incarcerated. I think it's labeled. So let's run this piece and we'll be right back at you. All right?
I gotta get you one of the.
In solitary, I've seen kids deteriorate. You put two kids in a room, they're gonna go crazy regardless. You put two kids in a cell and just slide a tray in there for them 3 times a day and that's it. They're going through sensory deprivation, emotional distress, mood disorders. So we know these facts, but we still persistently cage and we're addicted to confining our citizens. My name is Fai Mualim Ak. I served over a decade in prison, majority of that time in solitary. I've seen kids banging their heads on walls, trying to rap and make songs, and then as they start to deteriorate, they forget the lyrics, screaming in their cells at night, crying. I mean, we're torturing people.
The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture has said that no more than 15 days of solitary confinement should be allowed because it amounts to torture, yet in New York State, people are held not only 15 days, but 15 weeks, 15 months, even 15 years and longer.
Inside of solitary, you're alone. So this is where you have your little desk, a little chair to sit at your desk, but this is the only way and the only room that you have to walk around items all day.
this bill, which is pending in the New York State Legislature, would end solitary beyond 15 days and would create more humane and effective alternatives.
You're confined in this small space forever, and it seems like the days and the times just go by because you never see the sun. You never know if it's day or night. You only know by if that guard comes by to give you a meal. What got me through it was that there were so many people suffering inside with me. It's like being alone in a crowded space. You know, even though I'm out here and I'm struggling and we're struggling to help and support, they're still inside suffering. So our duty is to them who are still inside.
A program.
You know, see, that would drive me crazy. I don't think I could live with that. I really don't. I'm a social person. I've got to get. I mean, I just can't sit still. It put me in a hole, boy. And I've had that happen to me, but
yeah. Let me just mention briefly, right, before I forget. So we are currently, and you asked about this, I didn't get a chance, and so you wanted to know where we were with that. We're currently in the Corrections Committee with the bill, where it's currently sit. We have
Corrections Committee,
which is where the bill is. Once they voted out of there, then it goes
to Corrections Committee.
State legislature.
Yeah.
What is that?
So the Corrections Committee is a committee of legislators that sit and look at different bills and, you know, reforms and stuff and decide what bills are going to be sent forward to the next step for hopefully legislation to be passed.
Okay.
So currently our bill is sitting in the Corrections Committee. We currently have 71 co-sponsors in the Assembly and 21 co-sponsors in the Senate.
Okay.
We actually have an upcoming advocacy day on March the 13th, where we will be going to Albany with all of the advocates, all of the people that have been involved in the campaign, to hopefully convince our non-co-sponsors to sponsor the bill, to give it more juice, more power, so that they can bring it to the floor for a vote.
Okay.
So you spoke about a cell, and it's just so funny that Five, who was one of our both of our colleagues, we work together and stuff like that there. He's been on the show, right? We also have a replica cell that we now is transportable, it's mobile. We went up 2 years ago to Albany to do one of our other advocacy days, and we actually took the cell up there with us, and they built it and everything, and gave the legislators an opportunity to actually go and sit in that cell for a few moments to get a sense of what it feels like to be in a cell, to hear all of this noise by yourself, and closed up the door on them and everything like that there. And a lot of them, you know, never had a clue, you know what I'm saying, about what solitary confinement was really like, or what it does to a person's mental state of being. And they came out of there shaking their heads. And fortunately, a lot of them became our co-sponsors, who are now some of our co-sponsors in the Assembly. But hopefully, with this legislative session, because we're so close to getting it out of the Corrections Committee, hopefully within the next couple of weeks or so, that by the time we get to Albany, we'll hopefully have it at Assembly floor for a vote. And that we actually have been doing various events, and the 23rd of every month, we have what's called our solitary confinement speaker. Well, we go in different parts of the city and we speak about solitary confinement. We have people that are survivors of solitary confinement. We just came off of speaking engagement in Buffalo, New York, just this last week. We had another cell up there because we have a group of organizers in the Western region, right? And we had people going to the cell, and people coming out like shaking their heads, and like, you mean to tell me you have people in these cells for 22 to 24 hours a day for months? And you heard them, there is no limit on the amount of time people can spend inside. You have people in solitary confinement 30 and 40 years. Albert Woodfox. Albert Woodfox, 43 years. Angola, Louisiana.
Angola, right. I saw
Angola 3.
I saw a video. I had a video on that.
43 years in solitary confinement alone. Never mind being incarcerated, but could you imagine being in solitary for 43 years and then to come out?
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's out. He's actually on the speaking again. He's on the speaking circuit now.
And he's doing well.
He's doing very well. To talk to this man, you would never believe he was in solitary confinement 43 years, but just think
Does
about
he have a clue
those of them.
what got him through that? God?
Listen, God, first of all and foremost, that's what gets you through anything.
Right.
And I guess his resolve to, to not give in and succumb to his circumstances and his surroundings.
You know, in the movie, there was a movie Tom Hanks did a few years ago, Castaway, I think it was. He was a survivor, a boat sank or something. He's on an island by himself for a number of years. And there were some comedic moments in that movie, but there was a man in solitary on an island by himself, no one to talk to. And in the movie, you see him talking to some soccer balls and coconuts that he put faces on, and he's having conversations with them, and you see that he's losing his mind. He's not in a cell, he's on an island, but he's lost his mind because he has no contact with another human being. And if we go back to YouTube, take a look at the movie, then imagine the limited space. You have room to walk around in the cell. You're dodging the toilet and the desk and the bed, your cot, and that's it. You've got nowhere to walk. But you're in solitary. There are no palm trees, there are no birds flying by, nothing.
But even that, they talk about the sounds that you hear when you're in solitary confinement. You hear your neighbor screaming and yelling, banging his head against the wall. On Rikers Island, I mean, understand, we get all these weird stories. And see, Khalif Browder, what he went through as a young man, and he could have owned up and got out of jail. Why?
Just by copping out.
Why wouldn't he just cop out and say, I'm guilty? Just to get out of that madness. But he felt so strong about justice, doing the right thing. And just, I'm innocent. Why am I here? I mean, can you imagine a young mind going through that? And his mother is such an angel. So he had that love energy all around him. She came to court all the time, and she's suffering right along with him. And she died of a broken heart.
I had the youngest person I arrested, not the youngest person I arrested, but the youngest person that I arrested and went to trial with. I mean, I had a 12-year-old with 2 loaded .38s, but he went to family court. But I had a 16-year-old boy who had done 6 or 7 robberies. And when I caught him, I said, you should be going out with your girlfriend, playing some ball, going to school. This is a good time of life. I said, but you've damaged a major area in your life. I said, you're going to wind up doing state time. I said to him, you're 16 years old. You cannot defend yourself in a state prison system. And this is not a joke. And for our young guys out there, prison is not a badge of courage. It's not part of the maturing process. It can cost you your life. Young boys go to Rikers and don't get out of Rikers, let alone going to state prison. But he got sentenced to 5 to 7.
That's not
at age 16. Wow. And I told him, I said, you're 16, you can't defend yourself against those men. Post 9/11, I was pulling into a garage on 41st and Lexington. And the gentleman said, good morning, Detective Weatherspoon. I turned, I looked. He said, I give you a hint. He said, the Astoria houses. He was the father of the young man. Because I had met with the father and I told him, there's no getting out of this. And I said, how is your son? He said, he's home, he's fine. And he got sentenced in 1995, 95 or 94. He was out working for FedEx. He got married. He had a little child on the way. But he said it gave him a 180 approach to what he had been doing. And fortunately, he wasn't damaged. But that's no place for a kid to be. I have a friend who's a CO on Rikers, and he told me he was taking an assignment. First of all, he was fired for something he didn't do. Another CO had done. He went to court. He got his job back. And he told me, he said, I'm taking an assignment outside of the jail. He said, because it's that bad in there. He says, the horrors that are still going on in Rikers, and he says, as a correction officer, he says, I don't want to be in there. So we have some serious, he's a correction officer.
He wanted out.
And he's talking not about the inmates, he's talking about the correction officers. He said they need to shut the place down. He told me that last week.
Last week?
Last week.
Whoa.
Well, yeah. The Close Rikers campaign
Yeah,
is
it's a big one.
yeah, it's big and it's doing what it's supposed to do in a small regard, but it's still operative. Like Rikers is still up and running.
Yeah.
So the things that was going on and it has been going on is still going on. I had actually family that was from correction officers as well, and they're retired now, and they told me some stories about the stuff that happens in Rikers Island. And not to put a shade, a dark cloud on all of the officers there,
Okay.
because your friend is obviously a great guy, a good guy.
Yeah.
But if you go against that, you become their enemy as well.
Right.
You know, you went against the code blue.
Yeah.
Right. So you're basically, they're doing time as well as in a
Yeah.
sense, because
Yeah.
that's what my
That's
cousin was
right.
saying. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we
They're
did
doing
time
time,
with you. Yeah, but you were able to go home. And it just touches my heart to know that the correctional officers and every prison, there are good correctional officers in every prison that doesn't like the inhumaneness of what happens inside the correctional facilities across the state.
What are you doing for most of these girls that come out of prison?
I mentor women, women and girls coming out of prison. I help them reacclimate into society. I do workshops, I do seminars, and I just carry them through for like a year, and I'm just there as a mentor. Yeah.
So that helped heal you, huh? Helping other
Yes.
people. So
As
that's
well.
what we should do when you see a wound, you're trying to help out, huh?
Well, it's like this. You pay it forward, right?
Okay.
Because when I came home from prison, I know that for me, it took people that trailblazed before me to help me realize that it can happen.
Right.
So when you don't want to lose the people, you want to drop the recidivism rate. You want to drop. You want to, go into preventive measures. And how do you do that? You build a coalition of women that have actually lived through this process.
Right.
And then you go out and you talk to the young women that have that may be in trouble doing things in the society that you don't really, in community that they don't really need to be doing. So I actually do outreach sometimes as well. I right now live in Connecticut, and I'm joining forces with this organization to go out into the streets to talk to the troubled women, the troubled teens in the streets, and it's not easy because these are gang members. When you think about
Female?
gang, yes, see that's the same
Female
reaction.
gang
Yes.
members.
That's the
they have
reaction.
that.
Yes. You have to have, and that's the thing. People don't think about women or girls as gang
This is something
members.
new. This is
No.
You didn't always have female. I mean,
Okay.
I
Yeah,
go
you
back
did.
to
You
the
do
50s, 60s.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes. I'm sorry that it's a shock to you, but
No,
yes.
I know it exists, but
But you
tell
always
me
thought
about
about the men.
Yeah.
But there's women that see the young men have to have their women
Right.
alongside of them.
So they're
take
carrying
the
the gun.
initiation.
They're
Oh, they're not.
carrying
They're
the gun.
carrying guns,
They got their
knives.
own.
They're
They
doing a
carry
lot of
the
different
weapons.
things.
Grenades
People,
and
yeah, it's evolved to a
How
dark
bad
place.
is it today?
It's a dark place. It's really a dark place to where you don't even want to go in certain areas and certain neighborhoods. And it's
In
the point-
Connecticut.
And in New York. Well, Connecticut, of course, but New York, New York is the same way. Like I don't go outside after a certain
Street
time.
light come on,
The street
time to
light
be
comes,
inside.
it's time to go on the side. And I never knew the concept of that growing up. My grandmother used to say, when the street lights come on, you come in the house, right?
Right.
And I'm like, well, why? Now that I'm older and I'm wiser and I see, I'm like, oh, okay, I understand. So I have that same rule for my son. Street lights come on, you come in here. And if you're not here, you should be on your way and let me come and pick you up. Because my nephew got killed in 2014 in broad daylight in Connecticut.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Broad-
they were trying to rob him, and he wasn't backing down, and the guy pulled out the gun and shot him and killed him. So it is not easy
old
out
wa-
here.
how old?
My nephew had just turned 19
New Haven,
in Bridgeport.
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 Yeah, and the fact of the matter is, like, you know, my aunt, one of my aunts, she went home from a vacation. She came home into her house, and she realized that somebody was in the process of robbing her, but they couldn't take all the stuff that they had stacked up by the door. So she sat there and waited for them to come back, but she had her shotgun. Unfortunately for her, she died. She got killed by her own shotgun because when she woke up, they were in the house already, and they had
man.
already subdued her, and she started to run, and they shot her with her shotgun. But that was you know, and this is what this world is coming to.
This is when did
This
it
was a few years ago as well, but it's like, you know, it's a home invasion, and my aunt got killed.
So I have this image of Connecticut as being a liberal bastion of democracy, and I know you have the have and the have-nots, even worse up there, I understand.
Yes.
I mean, the rich people are just dominating the scene, and I mean, white supremacy reigns supreme up there, right?
Well, not necessarily in the bluntness of way you say it.
Okay.
You know, a lot of things mask themselves.
Not too many Trumps up there, huh?
Well, you have a lot of Trumps up there, but they're wearing masks, you know, and that's just the truth of the matter. They're wearing
Okay.
masks. They're not so much blatant out there racist and, you know, white supremacists,
Not in your
but
face.
no, not as much. In
They
certain
smile.
parts, exactly. Those are and that's what it's called. I think is adverse racism.
Pence.
You know.
They're pence.
Yeah, so so anyhow, so yeah, and Connecticut is, you have that. And if you want to talk about, we're in New York, but I can talk about Connecticut if you don't mind. Connecticut has the highest recidivism rate,
Ah, that's what you said to me. That's
Yeah.
what I heard.
higher than the nation itself
Okay.
in totality. And they're
That's
saying
planned.
that, huh?
That's planned.
Well, yeah, it has to be. They're saying that we're up and coming and we're full front as far as it's the Second Chance Act, but the numbers doesn't add up. They don't add up because if the recidivism rate is higher than the national average of recidivism, then how can we be number one in a second chance? The money that Connecticut gets is allocated to the Department of Corrections. It's not allocating it. Goes to the Department of Corrections. Department of Corrections, you know, divvies it out to, you know, whatever program, campaign, coalition, organization they feel it's deemed right for reentry.
Okay.
Because that's where there's 100% no reentry money in the state of Connecticut.
Say again?
100% no reentry money. Like the reentry money for
When you
cake.
get out of prison, you get nothing?
What? Yeah, no.
No
what you
assistance.
come up
No
with,
assistance.
yeah.
You have to, like, there's no state money for it. You have to do private funding, and it's very little. All the money go through the Department of Corrections.
How is
We're
it in
now-
New York?
No, it's different.
Well, I mean, you know, of course, in New York, you know what I'm saying, supposed to be pretty progressive.
Yes.
And a lot of programs that they have in New York, they are getting federal funds, state
Right.
funds, and
Okay.
private funding for reentry services. I mean, there are not enough. There are some that are proven evidence-based programs. You know, their reentry programs provide real reentry services in terms of the transition period.
Right.
So just saying, I think you were starting to say it. So just like with the campaign for alternatives to isolated confinement, which I'm the New York State organizer for, right? And we have funding to do the campaign. But in addition to the funding to do the campaign, we also have funding to assist those formerly incarcerated people that come out, right? That become members, active members, perform various functions in the campaign, speaking engagement, doing forums, organizing work stuff, where we can pay them honorariums for their time. So you can almost consider us almost like a reentry component. We're a reentry component through our campaign and coalition work that
So
we do.
somebody gets out and they don't know you, what do they do?
So most of the time, well, it's usually through, you know, either through the pre-release program in the prisons, which basically just about don't really do too much of anything, right? getting connected. Once they get out, right? People that are on parole, whatever the case may be, they can only have limited participation because a lot of my work involves us travel, and people on parole, of course, just can't travel anyway, anytime. So
What did
they're
they do
limited.
for Browder when he got out and he was innocent?
They didn't do anything
Nothing.
for
They
him.
did nothing, for
Nothing.
him,
They
right?
just say, go home. See you later.
They killed him.
Does
Yeah.
your program, in what you're talking about, as in your case, you got counseling, you got help.
How did you get the help?
In New York.
Ah, okay.
I just recently migrated. Should I say
Migrated.
yeah,
To Connecticut.
into Connecticut.
Yeah, right.
And everything that I've learned in New York, I see that Connecticut does
Doesn't
not
have.
have.
Oh,
No. So
wow.
now that's where I come in, and I will now
okay.
take so we can
Take it across the
partner-
border.
exactly,
Yeah.
and partner up with people like Cake, so Cake can come to New York.
okay.
To Connecticut, because we need awareness in Connecticut. New York has Cake. New York has Fortune Society, the Osborne Association, Stride. New York has
Okay.
a
Exodus, yeah.
gauntlet of different organizations that help re-entry.
The governor mentioned Khalif Browder in
Yeah.
the state address last week, and his
yeah,
brother was
yeah.
there. He had him stand up.
Yeah.
So we really have to look at this. If he's serious about making these changes, you really got to hold Governor Cuomo's feet to the fire in getting this bill pushed through. We don't have, there's a lot of people that need psychological and mental services. I remember Governor Carey cut the services for a lot of the mental institutions and said, well, go here on Tuesdays and pick up your medication. That doesn't work for people that are really in need and that were institutionalized because of their mental condition. People coming home, solitary, that should be part of an ongoing treatment before they come out.
That's right.
They shouldn't just be put out the door. Here's a token. Here's a plastic bag with your clothes, and we drop you at 42nd Street. That counseling should begin in the facility, and then when they come home, it helps them in their reentry and to reduce the recidivism. This is something. Monies, the state has monies. It's a matter of what they want to spend the money on.
And just
Yeah.
and just to speak to that,
Amazing.
so not only are we doing the solitary confinement, because we are also part of a larger collaborative of over 160 other organizations doing criminal justice reform work, reentry work, et cetera, interfaith groups. It's called the Challenging Incarceration, and we're not just doing solitary confinement. We're doing parole. We're doing
That's
bail.
right. Yeah.
We're doing closed Rikers and closed Attica. Okay, we're doing Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act.
Amen,
right?
brother.
So
Go ahead.
there's more coalitions in that are contained that we are actually a part of, but we are part of the Challenging Incarceration whole collaborative. And as you know, Winston, I did a forum last year at the annual convention called Challenging Incarceration.
Right,
That came out of that particular collaborative, and I had a few people that were part of the coalition that were there.
Yeah.
But more importantly, like I say, right, we are a collaborative of people on organizations that are working on more than just one platform of criminal justice reform, solitary confinement being one of who I work for, but there are other platforms that we talk, especially with the Closed Rikers campaign and the bail reform, speedy trial,
Restorative
discovery, restorative justice. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on that maybe people don't know about, but definitely this is one way for them to find out about it. And thank you for your show and Graham wealth of information.
Thank you for bringing the guests that you bring here. We used to do a show at least once a month.
Right.
He hasn't been here in a while.
It fell off, right?
Yeah,
He
absconded.
fell off.
Cake has had me
too busy
busy.
to come see me.
Cake had me
But I'm glad
busy.
he brought you here today, and I'm just I'm amazed to see that women are out there helping each other. And I mean, this is the year of the woman. I always say that God's a female, and I think we owe it to women. As my mommy was a woman. You know what I mean?
You do.
So,
You do. I'm not going to say no.
So she was my creator. So that's my angel. She's still up there on my shoulder. But women what kind of advice do you have for women coming out of prison or going through the trauma that you went through?
Get someone on your side and, behind you that has actually been through the walk, been through the traumatic experience.
So come see you?
You can come see me. My name is
Okay.
Tahiba Bain. You can reach me at my website. Well, not my website. My website will launch soon. But my email address is, my name, first and last name @gmail.com. My phone number I will not do. But
You don't want everybody calling,
I know,
right?
right? But yeah, definitely.
We should have put your
She's up there.
Your website up there.
Yeah, my website is going to launch real soon. I'm in the process of
Okay.
revamping all of that. And just because, like I said, I was originally in New York, and I realized that, don't get me wrong, Connecticut is up and coming. We have a
Okay.
lot of work to do.
I
They're
want
still
you to
living
promise
in
to
an
come back.
antiquated system.
It's almost time
I'm just
to
going to
go.
help them come on board.
That's where they took the
I will.
Amistad.
Thank you.
When the Amistad was discovered in the New York harbor, they took it out of the harbor and took it up to Connecticut. So don't ever assume. I was doing a lecture at Quinnipiac years ago, and I told the students, I know where I am. I remember the Amistad. I know exactly where I am.
All right, see?
That's Connecticut.
Yeah.
Keep them
exactly.
enslaved.
And with
And
that,
don't forget to come with us to Albany on March the
I didn't wanna say
13th.
that.
You can go on our website, that is nycaic.org, and you
Say
can
that
register.
again?
nycaic.org,
AIC.
and you can register to go on the bus with us to Albany, which is going to be March the 13th, or you can just go on and just see the work that we're doing, and also, find out when we have our meetings, and people are definitely encouraged to come and join our meetings in person and or on call, but definitely get on the bus March
Yeah.
13th.
And Bill Perkins is working on that bill.
Oh,
right?
that's
Actually,
right.
no.
Bill Perkins?
Now, Bill
we had a-
Perkins originally, just a quick update, Bill Perkins was the original Senate sponsor. He went to the city council.
Right.
Now we have Senator Kevin Parker, who is
Oh,
the
Kevin
primary
Parker.
sponsor in the
Okay.
Senate, and Jeffrey and Aubrey is the primary sponsor in the Assembly.
All right.
So those are our two
Thank you for
primary
coming.
sponsors.
It's
Thank you for having
been a pleasure. A dramatic subject matter, but again, as you come here every week at the Gilchrist Experience, the God in me loves the God in you. And here's where God plays an important role in all our lives. You have to remember, no matter what, you reach deep down inside and find that spiritual energy, and that'll drag you through any trauma, especially solitary confinement. Start talking to God inside there, and just ask Him to show you the light and get you through almost anything. I bet you that's how he spent 45 years in there. I don't know.
Not me. You mean 43? Yeah.
43 or
Albert
whatever.
Oh, just 43.
Peace and power to the people. God bless.